mentioned that what is most indicative of the problems that union has as being perceived as special interest groups manifests itself or is illustrated in the Fight for 15 movement, which has been fairly successful, I think. I mean,
Yeah,
fairly.
absolutely.
But explain why that's indicative of a problem that unions have.
Yeah. So what's critical to highlight there is something that one of my colleagues, Jake Rosenfeld, has talked about in some detail, is that you have this movement that's, we can I mean, I certainly have some criticism of it, but as you say, it's been, quite successful. I mean, the idea that $15 an hour is going to be the target that everyone's talking about, even 3 years ago, was unthinkable. So we need to really highlight that as a very significant victory. But but even though labor has essentially been at the center of that, very few people are aware of it, and that's because the unions involved, particularly SEIU, have actually gone to great lengths to conceal their role. And that is symptomatic of this fear that, if it becomes known that this is a sort of union-backed effort, that sort of delegitimizes it, right? The fact that labor is behind it sort of somehow makes it a less valuable cause. And so they actually try to hide the fact that they're involved. So even when they win these victories, people aren't aware that it's a labor victory.
I mean, people should really just take a moment to sort of take that in. That is a real problem, because it's a real problem, not that they did that necessarily, although that I think is problematic, because I think your argument is that that is sort of self-defeating in some respects. But it's also a problem that they feel they need to, and it's also a problem if they feel they need to and they're correct. That if having been, if the Fight for 15 was more prominently associated with the SEIU, and I'm not talking about how many dollars or how many organizers they had, if all the actual relationship was the same, but just that there was a greater awareness that SEIU was, at the very least, part of the engine driving this, that it would inhibit their success. That's bad. I mean,
yeah, and I think that, and part of it is that, that it is part of the crisis of labor's legitimacy, that even there's a lack of, support even on the left for the labor movement, because it's sort of perceived as a sort of special interest, and a lot of, even though the actual labor movement today is, one of the largest organizations of people of color, one of the largest organizations of LGBTQ people, one of the largest women's organizations, it still has this image as these sort of old white guys, who are sort of stuck in the, mid 20th century. And so it's not sort of, it doesn't have support even amongst the people, who should be part of its constituency.
I mean, is that, and you talk about really what needs to happen, and you quote Jane McLevy, who we had on this program, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, about her book, but you talk about the answer to this has to be multifaceted, but both in the shops, essentially, where people are unionized, but I imagine also on this level, where there is a sort of almost like a 30,000 foot change in messaging as to who unions are, because just that idea that SEIU was afraid of tainting what they're doing by associating with it, that's a problem.
Yeah, no, it is. And so that's, I think the key sort of takeaway point in the article is the need to link these sort of galvanizing ideas to grassroots organization, right? So it's really that you can't just have sort of messaging in the abstract level, talking about the big ideas of what we're trying to do, absent some sort of on the ground presence. And then you can't just sort of have the on the ground presence without some sort of orienting idea about what we're trying to do here, that is sort of what is our transformative vision that's actually going to do something. And so that's really, so I think, and that really starts in the workplace, right? Now, the thing there, obviously, is that the workplace is changing, and the idea of what a workplace is changing. And so there's all this talk about, the gig economy and, distributed production and the platform, platform economy that's going to change everything. The thing there is that, yes, that is a real challenge, that, getting people to recognize sort of a commonality of interest when they're dispersed all over the place. What that ignores is that that's always been a challenge for labor. That's always been a challenge for workers' movements. There isn't, there's always been these time periods where the fundamental challenge that workers have often faced is creating that common identity, not just for themselves, but also creating their oppositional identity, creating the what we're fighting against, right? So drawing the line has been one of the fundamental tasks that labor has faced all the time. This is just the latest incidence of it. This is the latest form that it's taken.
What do you think it is that has created such a deficit in the way that workers and labor self-identifies as workers or labor? Because that's the problem, right? Fundamentally, people don't realize that there are other people out there who definitionally are dealing with the same set of problems that they are, or very similar. And they also don't realize that there's enough commonality there that they can band together and actually have an impact on their own individual lives.
Yeah. So I think that we have to be honest and realize that some of it is just a legacy of defeat. Like, labor unions have often fought and lost. And when you lose, it hurts, and it has these long-standing impacts. And so some of it is just, fighting for workers is hard, and there's a long-standing legacy of defeat. The part that is, that where there's a bit more control, is the forms of political organization, the links. Because I think when you look at when labor has been strong, it has not, it has fought not just by itself, it has been sort of influenced by a powerful left, right? So in the 1930s, it was the Communist Party, and there's some Trotskyist organizations like that, but there was various shades of left parties that played key critical roles in building the labor movement of that time period. And even if you go back further, there are other groups that I could talk about. But that link between labor and the left was really severed in the post-war period, such that the new left of the 1960s was fundamentally different from any version of the U.S. left that had existed prior to it, in that it didn't have a base in the working class. That was something fundamentally new. And it was also a labor movement. So you had this sort of depoliticized labor movement that was cut off from this left that didn't have a base in the working class. And labor was tied to this Democratic Party that scholars of the mid-20th century know was dominated at the time by these reactionary Southern Democrats who served to break on social progress of all kinds, but including labor. which is, why it was the Southern Democrats that played a key role in the Taft-Hartley Act that you mentioned. So I think that sort of dismantling of the link between labor and the left and the tie to the Democratic Party coalition are the sort of particulars of the U.S. case that have played a role in its current week.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos